So let's talk about first what polyphenols are and how we go about getting those into the diet to have this uncoupling effect.
Yeah, I've been interested in polyphenols for actually 25 years now, and I used to present at the World Congress of Polyphenols every year until COVID. But polyphenols, and of course, so many of my products at Gundry MD are polyphenol based. Polyphenols are compounds that plants generate to protect their mitochondria, which are called chloroplasts, from sun damage, from environmental damage, from stress. And believe it or not, just like for us, we're dependent on oxygen to generate ATP. And at the same time, oxygen is incredibly damaging to mitochondria because of reactive oxygen species and free radicals. Same way with plants. They depend on photons from sunlight, but sunlight and photons are extremely damaging to their mitochondria, their chloroplasts. So they produce polyphenols, which are these bright colored compounds. The yellows, the oranges, the reds, the purples, the blues. Fun fact, in the fall in Ottawa, you see polyphenols in the trees. Those were there all along, except the green from all the chlorophyll kind of hid them. And when the leaf dies, now all you see is those gorgeous polyphenols. So how do polyphenols work? Well, it turns out that polyphenols uncouple the mitochondria of plants. So it prevents them from damaging themselves. Fast forward, when we eat polyphenols, number one, polyphenols are not well absorbed, but they provide fabulous prebiotic fiber for our gut microbiome. And the gut microbiome, in turn, converts those polyphenols into absorbable compounds. And the polyphenols, in turn, uncouple our mitochondria. And I think I said it on one part. I keep singing The Circle of Life from Disney's The Lion King because eating the rainbow of vegetables, in fact, should be rephrased eating polyphenols, because the rainbow are the polyphenols that you're getting the benefit from, and they came from plants. And that's another reason that the high-fat, boring ketogenic diet has been shown to have some pretty long-term bad effects, because you don't get any polyphenols that you should be getting by eating plants and this rainbow. I think the most dramatic example that really headed me down the rabbit hole again is a phenol-containing compound called 2,4-dinitrophenol. There's the word phenol. Back in World War I, it was noted that munition workers in France and Germany, who were making artillery shells and gunpowder, were incredibly skinny, even though they ate a lot of food, and they couldn't keep weight on. And interestingly enough, they ran a temperature. And nobody quite figured out why this happened until the 1920s, when a compound called 2,4-dinitrophenol, DNP, was discovered in the making of gunpowder, and lo and behold, DNP increased the metabolic rate of these individuals. Are we sensing a theme here? Some researchers at Stanford in 1930 said, oh my gosh, these individuals were really skinny and their metabolic rate went up. This is the greatest weight loss compound of all time. So they began prescribing DNP to over 100,000 Americans, and worldwide a lot more. And it was miraculous. If you took a low-dose DNP, you would lose a pound a week, no matter what you did. At higher doses, you would lose 5 pounds per week. I mean, whoa! I mean, miraculous. Unfortunately, there was a downside. People ran high temperatures. They began to have thyroid dysfunction. They developed cataracts, and this was before cataract surgery. And as I like to joke, it'd be great fitting into that skinny dress, but you can't see yourself in the mirror because you got cataracts. And then people started dying. So in 1938, the FDA, as one of its actually first official acts, banned DNP for sale. And that ended the DNP, except on the dark web, you can still find DNP. But what they found, and they didn't realize this until 1978, that DNP was the first oral mitochondrial uncoupler. And it worked by aggressively uncoupling mitochondria. Why did people die? When you took a huge amount, you uncoupled mitochondria so much that the cells literally could not make enough ATP to survive, and people died. So, like I talk about with these compounds, you want to find the Goldilocks rule. You want the little dab will do you. So the whole idea that phenols uncouple mitochondria came out of DNP in the 1930s.
Just to make sure I understand this correctly, when it comes to polyphenols, you mentioned there that they're not absorbed readily. Do any of them make it through into the bloodstream and to different cells throughout the body and eventually to the mitochondria to uncouple? Or is it all through the gut bacteria?
About 10% of polyphenols are absorbed. And one of the things that I mentioned in the book, which really blew my mind years ago at this polyphenol meeting, the head of this group is Marvin Endes from Paris. And he addressed all of us in Lisbon one year. And there are 1,000 researchers in the room. And he said, anybody who actually thinks that polyphenols are antioxidants can leave the room right now, because I don't have time to catch you up on what polyphenols really do. And that just blew me away because, in polyphenols, we talk about ORAC numbers, oxygen radical absorbing capacity. And that's the ability of polyphenols to absorb oxygen radicals. And he says, no, that's not what they do, you morons. They're not antioxidants. They're uncouplers. And get over it. We've gotten this all wrong. So, yeah, you can get a little bit of absorption of polyphenols, but most of the action actually comes from they're being converted by gut bacteria into their active compounds.
And when you say active compounds, is that the short-chain fatty acids or they're still polyphenols?
They're still polyphenols, correct.
Well, let's stick on the gut bacteria for a while then. I just, segued us into the short-chain fatty acids. This is another, reason that we need to maintain the gut microbiome. There's still polyphenols. When polyphenols get ingested through the diet, they help us get those, into the body, uncoupling the mitochondria. But then separately, when we take good care of our microbiome, it's going to make these short-chain fatty acids, and then those are uncouplers as well. So everything's just tying itself together here. So talk about how that process works.
So when you feed gut bacteria, gut buddies that I call them, what they want to eat, which are soluble fibers. And soluble fibers are actually pretty easy to obtain in the diet. Interestingly enough, most polyphenol-containing foods also have soluble fibers in them. But the class of vegetables, which are called the chicory family of vegetables, like radicchio, some people call it the Italian red lettuce. It's not lettuce at all. Chicory, frisee, Belgian endive. I use Belgian endive as a dipping chip for my guacamole, which is great for you. And by the way, guacamole has a lot of soluble fiber. So the chicory family is great. Asparagus is loaded with soluble fiber. Most tubers, like jicama, is loaded with soluble fiber. Inulin is probably the best soluble fiber there is. You can buy inulin as a powder. It has a slight sweet taste. You can sweeten things with inulin. So it's easy to get soluble fiber in our diet. The bacteria eat the soluble fiber. They ferment it. They then turn these into what are now called postbiotics. And I spent the last book, The Energy Paradox, extolling the virtues of postbiotics. Postbiotics are literally a communication system between our gut bacteria and our mitochondria. And some of the most exciting postbiotics are these short-chain fatty acids. Many people have heard of butyric acid or butyrate. Fun fact, butter is named after butyric acid because there's a little bit of butyric acid in butter. Not much. Sorry, Dave Asprey, my buddy. There's not much in butter. But that's where the word came from. Butyric acid is actually a mitochondrial uncoupler in itself. Plus, butyric acid is actually the substrate for the ketone beta-hydroxybutyrate, BHB, which is one of the main ketone bodies. And it just happens to be the substrate. But butyrate can uncouple mitochondria just as effectively as ketone bodies. Another fun thing that bacterial fermentation makes is another short-chain fatty acid called acetate. And there's another one called propionate. Acetate, most people know as acetic acid, vinegar. And acetic acid also uncouples mitochondria. So, apple cider vinegar. The miracle weight loss of apple cider vinegar is that the acetic acid in apple cider vinegar uncouples mitochondria. Balsamic vinegar. Put a little balsamic vinegar or apple cider vinegar in some San Pellegrino sparkling water, and you've got, your own uncoupling water for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And you uncouple every time you have it. Put vinegar in your salad. You uncouple your mitochondria. When you start looking at what all of these health things do, it all comes down to just one thing. They all uncouple mitochondria. Cool.
So you talked about the short-chain fatty acids there. What about the gases those bacteria make? Is that part of the uncoupling as well?
Yeah, it turns out that we now recognize that there are gasomessengers that are the gases that these bacteria make during fermentation. And they are as simple as hydrogen gas. Believe it or not, methane is an uncoupler. Believe it or not, carbon dioxide is actually an uncoupler that I get into, and why carbon dioxide uncouples neurons very effectively. And hydrogen sulfide, which is thought to be toxic, is actually a major uncoupler that these bacteria produce. And this, nitric oxide is another mitochondrial uncoupler. And the discovery of these postbiotic gases won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2012. So it's not a fanciful idea. And as I talked about in the previous book, if you look, Japanese research found that people with Parkinson's disease have a gut microbiome that doesn't produce hydrogen gas, whereas people who don't have Parkinson's disease have a gut microbiome that produces hydrogen gas. So they actually gave hydrogen dissolved in water, to these people with Parkinson's, and their Parkinson's symptoms got better, showing that it was the hydrogen that was actually doing something to the neurons in their brain, which was uncoupling them. So it all starts to, the whole thing kind of starts coming together.
If you enjoyed that clip, press here for the full episode. I'll see you over there.
When you start looking at what all of these health things do, it all comes down to just one thing.